Hello everyone and welcome back to Noia Dev, the series that aims to prove that one developer can create a successful MMO RPG. My name is Dane and this week on Noia Dev we're talking about lore. Up until now, most of the names and locations have had placeholder names, and only very recently did any of the quests in Noia have some sort of overarching theme or story driving them forward. That is going to start to change for the better. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been delving into story writing and campaign crafting, and in my journeys, I came across this particular video by Extra Credits. This video investigates how games keep players interested in playing. Seems like a pretty relevant topic. What's interesting is rather than trying to create quest lines and stories, the video goes into creating goals for the player to achieve. And when I heard that, something clicked. Rather than asking, what quest should I put in this area, the question becomes, why is the player here and what should they be working towards? To give a perfect example of this methodology in action, we can look towards Zelda and its Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom games. In Breath of the Wild, as soon as the player has completed the tutorial of the game, the main objective appears: defeat Calamity Ganon. This overarching goal might have been a bit too much for new players, but it did set a clear expectation for where the player was going to end up at the end of the game. And here's the best part. As the player is making their way through those different areas of the world, they inevitably come across these little areas of interest, which in turn create little minor goals if the player decides to investigate. And I want Noia to follow this proven methodology. Funny thing is, I had designed the tutorial area of Noia, the underworld, to do this very thing. I just forgot somehow? I don't know. The player wakes up, talks to Dan, gets some weapon, is immediately given a quest: find a way out of the underworld. Dan gives a hint that the NPC Morb might be able to help, and along the way the player will see these other NPCs and have the opportunity to do some side quests. The player collects some weapons from Morb and outfits his militia, and they storm the castle that bars the path out of the underworld. The player is captured and confronted by the Queen of the Underworld. The Queen marks the player as an emissary forever cursed to do her bidding and funnel power back to her and her domain. Sounds pretty good so far, right? But for whatever reason, as soon as the player is out of the underworld, that's where my brain stopped, and I never gave the player a new goal. Sure, there are some quests in this new area, but there's nothing to tell the player what their purpose is in this world. So let's talk about that. Once the player is out of the underworld, Dan will confirm that the player has indeed been marked as an emissary by the Queen, but for some strange reason doesn't appear to have been brainwashed by the curse. Weird. Whatever. I'm sure it's not relevant. Dan will urge the player to find a way to break the curse, and perhaps suggest that they eliminate any other emissaries that they would happen to meet along the way. Aha! So now the player has a goal. 2, in fact. I'm not entirely sure why, but when I created these 2 goals, my brain immediately thought of this anime that I grew up watching called Inuyasha. The entire anime was based around 2 goals: defeat the big bad guy, this guy named Naraku, or retrieve shards of the Shikon jewel so they could use it to defeat Naraku. The plot of pretty much any episode of that anime could be boiled down to one of those 2 goals. And it worked. Really good, actually. So when dealing with the quest lines in Noia, or looking for ways to nudge the player along in the future, I can always look back to one of these 2 primary goals: break the cursed and defeat emissaries. Speaking of emissaries, there are currently 4 emissaries that I have come up with for the players to encounter: the Parasite, the Illusionist, the Berserker, and the Speaking of emissaries, there are currently 3 emissaries that I've come up with for players to encounter: the Parasite, the Illusionist, and the Berserker. The Parasite, Mozg, is a sentient brain parasite capable of infecting a host body and slowly corrupting the host's will. If you've gone through the Norman and Elva questline in the forest and battled through the giant beehive, you're already familiar with Mozg's handiwork. The Illusionist, Nisei, creates false realities large enough to encompass an entire city. Think like WandaVision, but much more nefarious in nature. She creates this utopia where the townsfolk live in ignorant bliss as their true bodies slowly deteriorate and die. And lastly is Vara. I could tell you about Vara, but let me instead just tell you about Vara's inspiration, and I think you'll get the picture. There's a book series that I love called Cradle, written by Will Wright. And in the Cradle series, the practitioners of the mystic arcs can train their bodies and spirit to do amazing magical things. Normally, for a practitioner to rise through the ranks and become like a general of an army or even the leader of a country, a monarch as they're called, a person would need to have endless resources poured into their training. I'm talking like entire government's budgets funneled into training a single person. But there was one monarch level practitioner in the books who got to that level with brute force alone. That person's name was Northstrider. As a child, Northstrider grew up wrestling sharks and other deep sea ocean leviathans. He tussled with a titan the size of a mountain, was presumed dead, but turns out the dude went on a 50-year sabbatical to go hunt dragons with his bare fists because he just wanted to get stronger. He even turned down a gift from a god because he thought it would be accepting power that was not his own. And that is the inspiration for Vara. So good luck with that. I have some ideas for some other emissaries in the future, so keep an eye out for those in a future devlog. And that's it for this week. I actually did have a whole lot of technical stuff that got done in these last 2 weeks, but I got so caught up in writing this script, but by the time I was around the 8-minute mark, I had completely forgotten to put any of it in. So maybe next time. I am actually really excited with this new kind of perspective that I have on the story writing part of Noia, so I do want to focus these next couple of weeks and get some quests in. All that being said, I gotta get back to work, so I'll see you next time. Bye.